Hi, I'm Kathryn Costa, and welcome back to another Soul to Soul conversation. I'm really excited about this one because it's about one of my very favorite topics, which is all about connecting with animal spirits. Joining me today is a member from our Oasis community who has a 20-year background, experience, and insight and training around working with animal allies. Joining me today is Susan Morse. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's fun. This is going to be a fun topic.
Yeah, I love this topic and I can't wait to learn from you. One of my intentions with this particular interview is that it's educational, that helps the person who's brand new to working with animals, or maybe those who have like picked up some animal cards, they've been dabbling with it, but are looking for a little more information, and we can provide them with some basics to get them a really good solid foundation for how to go forward with working with animal allies. And of course, I also want to connect with you towards the end about your experience with the Oasis, with all your background and how the Oasis has been supporting you personally. But let's begin with you telling us a bit about yourself and how you got started working with animal allies.
Okay. All right. So a bit about me. First off, I am launching a new phase of my life, a new business. I'm calling myself a life concierge, which means that whatever somebody needs help and support with, I can offer that help and support. And very specifically, I'm interested in helping people live into their greatness. So awakening that giant within. Currently, I'm working with an 18-year-old who is designing the life he wants to step into after high school. I'm working with a 45-year-old mom who's leaving a toxic job situation so that she can live more in line with her soul's purpose. And those are the clients I'm interested in working with. And I love the idea of working with the animal allies with these clients, because these animals have so much to teach us about our greatness and about the giant that is inside of each of us. So my background in animals, let's see. So I'm 51 now, and since I was a little girl, I have been a friend of the animal world. I had pets as, growing up, cats, a fish, things like that. And as a child, I spent as much time outside as I could. Heaven for me was to be outside in and amongst the trees, studying and looking at the beetles and the insects and the spiders and the worms and, whatever animals. I wasn't picky, just bring me an animal, right? I love all the animals that most people find annoying, because I love animals. So probably in my early 20s, in my first job, but my first life was as a teacher. My first teaching job in my early 20s, we took our 8th grade class on a canoe trip, and the guide company that led us on the trip, one of the guides was of Native American descent. So we were sitting about a campfire one night, and this frog keeps hopping over and stays right around me. And he looks over at me and he says, that's your totem. And I said, oh, what? And this was really a first awakening for me around totems and spirit guides showing up as animals and power animals. So soon after that, somebody introduced me to Jamie Sams and David Carson's book and cards, and I just gobbled it up. I loved it. I love symbolism. I loved, by that point I was already familiar with the archetypes. So I just loved learning more about myself and more about the world and the way it works. Eventually, I was introduced to other experts in the world, like Ted Andrews and Steve Farmer, and I studied their materials to gain my comfort in this topic. You know, I was a very good student, so I knew how to study, I knew how to research, I knew how to learn from books. So I did that and built a foundation. And then I began interpreting for myself. And so probably for the past, you know, at least 5 years, I've pulled away from the books, maybe longer, and I really study the animal. I commune with the animal. And I've actually, but that's not the topic for today, I've actually also started working with plants. Um,
Mm.
but the beings of the natural world. And just recently, I stayed very quiet about this. I wasn't sure that the world around me would accept this and would accept me working with this information. I grew up, you know, in a very conventional setting, and a couple of years ago, someone in my family needed my help, and I brought the animal medicine to his situation, and he said, "Whoa, you have to start sharing this. You have talent here. You are gifted, and you've got to start sharing this."
All right, so now I'm really curious. Tell me more about that specific, without, you know, since you haven't told us who that is, we're not breaching any confidentiality. Can you tell us a little bit more specifically about what that person's situation was and how the animal medicine helped? And maybe even before that, like explain a little bit about what you mean by animal medicine.
Okay, all right. So animal medicine. Let's start there. So when I'm going to go up a little bit meta, a big picture, and then come back down. So the way I look at it, all of creation is one big divine fabric, and we're all part of this one fabric. And everything that's part of this fabric, it is holy and sacred, and in various ways. You know, if we want to talk about God or source or the universe, right? It wants to get our attention all the time, wants to get our attention and bring us back into the divinity that's rightly ours. But sometimes we're too caught up in, you know, the grocery store list and you know, and getting the kids out the door in the morning, or the problems at our job or whatnot, that we forget this. And so these animal messengers are here to just constantly tap at the window and tap on our shoulder and say, "Hey, there's something bigger. There's deeper meaning here. There's something, you know, you've got some great qualities." Or, "Hey, we could guide you in the qualities that you could bring to this situation to handle it better," right? So this information's around us all the time. And that's the medicine of the animals. Right? If I think of a medicine, if you take cough syrup, it helps alleviate your cough. It helps alleviate your suffering. It helps you to relax, to be able to heal. And so the animals offer, through their qualities, through their unconditional love to all of us, they offer a balm for the soul. They offer qualities that say, "Hey, we could help you heal this situation. We could help you heal this broken spot in your heart." So that's the medicine in my mind. That's how I think of it, that when I say animal medicine. So this person in my life, I will tell you because he's always told me it's okay to talk about him. It's my older brother.
Okay, great.
And so my older brother, you know, growing up, I always looked up to him. I just, you know, I copied him. I wanted everything he was doing. I thought, oh, that's what I should be doing. But at a certain point, I knew there were things he was doing that I couldn't do. And he went down a path in life that was very laser focused and very intense. He was a surgeon. And I could not do that. I could not have a life that was so all consuming. I needed a life that had more balance and more time outside. So he pursued that, and you know, has a lovely family, has, you know, grown children, and his wife, and he reached a point a couple of years ago where he couldn't do it anymore. where his work setting had, in various ways, become toxic. Part of it is what's happened in conventional medicine in our country, where the doctors aren't really the decision makers in their practice anymore, right? And so, and there's so much focus on how much money is being made, and right. So he was really losing the vitality out of his practice, out of his work, which was pulling the vitality from him. So he and I began talking, and I began helping him work through what was going on and happening for him. And I helped him to understand that all of life is energy and vibration, and to start paying attention to the vibrational aspect of what was going on around him and the tough meetings that he was in, to pay attention to the vibrations and to be in touch with his vibration and not let his vibration get pulled down to match the lower vibration that was happening in these toxic meetings. And he was fascinated by that.
Cool.
So then I brought the animals into him, and he quickly connected, and this was beautiful. Our father, so my brother and I lost our father when we were children. We were both very close with our father, and I was 12 and my brother was 14 when we lost him. And my father has been with me every day since. He is my greatest consult. He's on my board of directors, my virtual board, and I consult with him every day. But my brother didn't have that relationship with him. So I helped him cultivate that relationship through the animals. And Crow is the animal that my brother began to realize is how our father came to him and talked to him. And every time before he walked into a difficult meeting for about 6 months, he would spy Crow sitting somewhere nearby before he walked into a building where there was going to be a difficult meeting. And yes, and it just so happens that our father loved crows and had a crow call, the little, wooden crow call that my brother had. I didn't even know it. I had forgotten about it. And so my brother began working with Crow.
I'm going to interrupt you here once, just because you and I, what are the people watching this don't realize is that you and I recently have connected, and you and I have so many different points of connection where our paths have crossed but we haven't met, or we have things in common. So this is my Crow connection. My mother had a connection with Crow, and people will probably think I'm really crazy, but all right, here's my computer. I've got a couple of shelves here, and on the top shelf, I happen to have a box that I put up there recently, and this is what's been with me.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's great.
The old Crow. This is a liquor box. I had gone to the liquor store to grab a bunch of boxes, and I picked out ones first and foremost that had designs that I liked.
Yes.
And so putting that there. So I want you to know your father's with us on my shelf.
I love it. Oh, I love it. And so Crow, let's talk about Crow for a minute, what Crow teaches us. So Crow represents spiritual law. Crow represents that there are spiritual laws that govern all of creation, and that human laws are let's say underneath spiritual laws, and that spiritual laws trump human laws. So the human laws
are like a governing thing, whereas it transcends.
Yes. So Crow also teaches us to balance past, present, and future. So Crow has the ability to see all three fates at one time, and to keep them balanced. And Crow also teaches us to speak our truth, to call the shots as we see them, and to that when our personal integrity is our best friend, and when we are standing in our integrity, everything works out fine because it works out according to spiritual law. So crow is also black, which is the color of the great mystery, the great void from which all things are created. So crow represents the all of creation that hasn't yet come into manifestation. And then sometimes crow has an iridescence, which speaks to the magic of life. So and that we'll get to, but that's an example of how we look at an animal and pull the meaning from the symbol, looking at the color, looking at the sounds, all sorts of characteristics.
So the messages that you just shared with us, to me, sound like these are those empowerment messages. Do they ever give medicine in terms of wanting you to wake up to a behavior you may be doing that's holding you back? So
Yeah.
might crow have a message for us that's saying, hey, you're doing something that's holding you back, that's getting in your way, or maybe even causing some wounding for you? Do you know, with crow specifically, what that kind of messaging might be?
Yeah. So sometimes people, I want to say this because this is really important. Sometimes people talk about omens, and the word omen sometimes can have a negative connotation or an occult connotation, right? And that's not what we're dealing with at all. So whenever any of these animals, and we'll say crow specifically, have a message that is like oh, wake up, stop doing that, it's not an omen. It's not always these animals are coming to us to help us live more into our highest self, right? And so there's not ever like bad messages coming. Okay, so I like to be clear about that, because some people really get fearful of, oh, it's it's an omen of bad things to come. No. So what crow does, and often in the animal totem world, we talk about the animal in the reverse position or contrary, which means if you're using cards, that you would pick the card and it would be upside down. But you can see the animal contrary or reverse if you find it dead somewhere. That's another indication that it's teaching you like, wake up. So what crow teaches us, many things, but one of the things that crow will say is, hey, wake up to spiritual law. You're too caught in the human definitions of right and wrong, and that's huge in our world right now. I mean, it's going on right now on the streets, in every sound, what is right and what is wrong. And crow says, whoa, wake up to a higher truth, wake up to a spiritual truth. Crow can also tell you that if you're speaking out of line, that you're going to eat crow.
Yes.
Right? It can be so, all these aphorisms that we've come up with, right? They have butterflies in our stomach or eat crow. They're real, right?
Sure, for sure. And once you start like noticing animals and you start thinking of these things, it's like we'll be like, give new dimension to these old sayings that we've heard all our lives.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So crow can warn us, you're getting a little close to, you're either speaking out of both sides of your mouth or speaking an untruth, and you're going to pay for it. Yeah, if you're, but that's not it's not an omen. It's just as simply, hey, I'm your
advice. It's an advice. It's or it's like, I like to think of all divination as like going to a wise friend for counsel. And their words of wisdom are like medicine that can help heal any kind of wounding you have. So,
Yes.
for example, when I think crow, one of its relatives is the magpie, and the magpie can get very gossipy. So, if you are not in right speech and you're going around talking negatively about someone or a situation, the person who gets wounded the most is you, because that vibration is coming through your thing. So you are physically wounding yourself, emotionally wounding yourself, and psychologically and mentally keeping yourself in this negative way. You know, that magpie, right? And, and so magpie is here to say, you know, how are you using your speech,
Mhm.
and are you creating more suffering for yourself because of what it is you're saying? And all birds, as just a real blanket statement, I think for everyone, before, you know, as a general rule of thumb, all birds are messengers, and messengers from spirit.
Mhm.
But they have within them unique characteristics about them, based on their coloring, their behavior, the way they preen, the way they mate, the way they engage in life, the way they create their homes or their flight migration patterns. We can study each, you know, if a bird comes into our field of vision, learn about them, and then say, oh, what can they teach me? And how can I embody their strengths
Mhm.
and and bring that forward? So that's just a little adding to what you've shared with us with Crow. I got a couple of questions. These are some real basic questions to help, especially those who are new to animals. I've heard the term power animals, animal allies, totem animals, spirit animals. Is there a distinction among those?
Yes and no, and I'll try to be brief with this because I could wax on about this for a long time because I love to get philosophical. But so first, I'll say that you know, humans, we create the words for things, right? We create the definitions, we create the meanings. And so if certain words aren't serving us well, or meanings or definitions aren't serving us well, we have the power to change those. So when we look at the words, you know, power animal and totem and animal guide and whatnot, uh, in the in the tradition, there are differences, but ultimately, um, it is it is great spirit coming to us through these messengers to say, um, you know, you're beautiful, you're loved, and I have support for you right now
Mhm.
through this messenger. So ultimately, there, you know, it's important to not get too wrapped up in semantics and words, right? But then let's do for a moment talk about the words. So typically, as I understand it, um, totems are a person, an individual's totems are those animals that uh, let's say that you're born with these animal allies, and your personality, your characteristics, your essence most reflect the qualities and characteristics and essences of these animals. Typically it's 9 totem animals that an individual has. Some traditions say 7, but so typically let's go with 9. And you might not know all 9 of them all at the same time in your life. You know, like right now, I only know 7 of mine, and I only just recently discovered 2 more. So for the first 50 years of my life, I only really had knowledge of the first of 5 of them. So the totem animals represent it's almost your signature, so to speak, right? And in the days of when Native Americans were the main inhabitants of this continent, and they made totem poles, and those poles represented those animals that were their signature animals for the individual and then also for the collective. So totems are personal. Then we have what I just think of as animal guides. And that can be just a flash. That could just be that an ant walks across your desk. And just in that moment, Great Spirit has a message for you from Ant that can help you just in that moment. And either you get the message or you don't. But there's no, it's not that Ant is now becoming one of your totems, or it just was in the moment, right? And then I think of power animals as animals that they could be your totem or not, but these are animals that teach you a lot and protect you and guide you significantly in your life. And so I'll give you an example. For me is that bear is one of my power animals. So whenever I'm on any kind of guided soul journey or shamanic journey, and my power animals show up, bear and spider are the two main power animals that show up to take me wherever we're going, or to present me with something or whatnot. And it just so happens that spider's also one of my totems, but bear is not one of my totems, but bear is my power animal. And the power animals can change throughout, so I think it's important to work with the constructs that the indigenous peoples of the world created that have been relayed to us through people like Ted Andrews and Jamie Sams and Steve Farmer. But it's also important to not get hooked into definitions that can't be malleable and ultimately get in our way, right? As long as those definitions don't get in our way of accepting the medicine from the animal world.
Yeah, and also, my approach to it is also being careful not to get rigid in any way, so we don't allow ourselves to get stuck and say, well, this is my animal, and not be open to learning from any other animals, and being, we actually limit our ability for our personal growth when we say, well, my power animal is the hawk, which was mine 30 years ago. I did it. My first husband led me in my first journey, shamanic journey. I didn't even know it was a shamanic journey. We were just like, yeah, he's like, hey, you want to go find your totem animal? I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. And he led me in this journey, and hawk was with me. And then I would always see hawks. And I lived in Colorado at the time. I lived in a small mountain town. And there was I was in a very small town of 400, and I would go to the nearest larger region to do shopping and whatnot. And there was always this hawk that I would see. And so that was my connection. And while hawk sometimes shows up now at certain times when it's really a big transformation in my life, like when I started doing the shamanic training, before I did that, a few months before, I was invited to do a despacho ceremony with a shaman from Peru, and I had to drive from New Hampshire over to New York, to Austerlitz, New York, over in the Berkshire area, just in that part of the that region. And it was amazing the number of hawks I saw going there and coming back. And so it was like, wow, hawk's back, and whoa, yay. But since then, there have been other power animals, and whether or not they're part of my totems, I know I have adopted some that I'm learning from with my training in the shamanic. We have 4 specific ones that are each in the directions. But yeah, I think the most important thing I would love for people to take away from this is really allow yourself to be open to learning from all animals, and not worry about and get hung up on, like you said, the semantics and getting too rigid. I happen to mention, and we both talked about shamanic journeys that help someone get to know their power animal. What are some other ways that a person could connect with animals? And you mentioned an ant running across your desk. What are some other ways?
signs come to us, whether it's animal signs or, you know, a angel coming to us or a departed loved one, all they come to us, I think of through four main pathways, probably even more, but you know, we'll just speak of four. We see them. So sight is one of the pathways. So we see something over and over and over again. We see pictures of it. We actually see it, the animal itself. We see the words about it. We read about it in a book, whatnot. Another is feelings, feeling that an animal is present or nearby, or we start feeling, remembering how we felt holding our cat when we were a kid. Another is thoughts, right? That we just start thinking about things, hearing it. So you may, like today, I was at a friend's house and we heard fox barking in the distance. So I never saw or felt or thought about fox, but I heard fox. So basically pulling in through all the senses, right? And then our thoughts. So it's interesting because I think the people, you know, those of us who, you and I both live in New Hampshire, we both have access to wild animals. We see black bears, we see woodpeckers, we see foxes, bobcats. And if we don't see them in our own environs immediate, we see them in the news, we see them, you know, we can drive to the White Mountains and see them, moose, deer, everything. But I think for people who live in urban and suburban areas, they can feel sometimes more cut off, yet they have access, right? There's peregrine falcons in cities, there's robins everywhere and pigeons, and these are important animals, even though they seem like common animals. I mean, the cockroach is an important animal, has incredible lessons to teach, and that's probably.
Well, and I hope everybody watching, you're not going to be seeing cockroaches.
Right? Yeah.
I don't want that to cross your path.
Yeah. And, you know, and people have we'll talk about this, I'm sure. People do get a little frustrated sometimes with animals like mosquito and tick and, you know, and flea and squirrel, right? And so, but those are important messengers. So I would say that to connect with the animal world, and to receive the messages, it's about opening up your mind and your thought to all of the animal life around you, whether it's, you know, the ant crawling across your kitchen counter, or the tick on your dog, whatnot. And another way is using divination tools, right? So using a guidebook where somebody has written about the animals and given you information. And then I don't have this open, but there's a deck in here of cards that, right, you can do a card spread. You could do it yourself. You could work with somebody who's more knowledgeable and do that with them. And animals come to us in dreams as well, right? How many times, just regular old dreaming. It doesn't have to be, you know, any, you know, a shamanic journey. It can just be a dream that you wake up in the morning and you're like, wow, there was a snake in my dream, or there was this, you know, chipmunk running around or whatnot.
One idea I've been doing a lot lately in order to get to know animals better is to watch documentaries.
Yes.
And as you're watching those documentaries, you really get to see what they're like. And that's how I discovered that the hummingbird, the pattern of the wing and as its movement is that of the infinity symbol. And every year at the beginning of the year, I pick a word for the year, but I've started picking a symbol for the year. And my symbol for this year is the infinity symbol. For me to see that actually in this documentary, and even if I saw a hummingbird live, I would not be able to see that kind of detail. And we also are limited by the number of hummingbird species available to us here in New Hampshire, but through beautiful documentary, I get to see the variety and just the awesomeness of this one type of animal up close and personal. And so I'm a big fan of, and there's so many beautiful documentaries out there that help us to get to know the animals with a more of a direct response than reading somebody else's interpretation about them.
We can look at the gestation time. So if a certain animal carries its young for 8 weeks, in the animal world, gestations are often shorter. Sometimes they're way longer, but they're shorter than human gestation. So if it carries it for 8 weeks and then they're born, then when that animal comes to you, and you would know, as you study, you would know this, that you look at, 8 weeks, I'm going to carry a project in my womb of creation for 8 weeks. And 8 weeks from now, something is going to be birthing, something is going to be coming out.
Right.
And I love that kind of symbolism.
That's a really cool one. And it may be something like a project, or it could be that there's something you are challenged with that maybe in the course of that gestational period, you will get the insights you need to grow beyond where you are.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. For all, this entire universe is just patterns, and it's patterns over and over again. And that's really what we're dialing into when we take the gifts that the animal world has to offer us, is we're reading the patterns and then we're
Yeah.
applying it to our life.
No doubt. And in the Oasis, we talk about, the energetic patterns of the sky, the lunar cycles, and looking at the constellations, which zodiac sign are we in the moment. But also it's so as above, so below. Well, it's also just out here, so within. So what we're usually seeing is outside of us is mirroring what's happening within us. So we're getting some visual clues when we start seeing animals around us as to something that's mirroring something within us. We are energetically attracting that which we need to hear, that's going to help us with our own personal evolution.
Yes. Yes. You just said it so nicely.
I want to just share you something, because you've mentioned fox a number of times. And coming up in the Oasis, I am going to be featuring working with animal allies. I'm going to lead everyone in a shamanic journey to connect with an animal ally, even if they have, like you, a background with different animals, you've got different totems. It's always interesting to see which animals show up in the moment, because every moment is different than the previous moment, and what we need varies. So I'm going to share this with you because I designed this yesterday, and this is the artwork to promote this Oasis session.
Ooh, that is so beautiful.
There's the fox and butterfly. I
Oh,
really wanted it to be magical, because I think that ever since, for most of us as children, when we get to know animals, and when we've had, those of us who've had the joy of being able to live with animals as pets, there is that special connection. And while we often personify and project onto animals, it's for good reason, because, and you also look in every culture. When you look at, when I studied martial arts, a lot of the poses that we learn are inspired by different animals and watching them. What are their strengths? What are their characteristics? Are they flexible? Are they strong? How do they move? And how can we bring that with us? So as I was designing this yesterday, and it all comes together quite magically because I work intuitively and I co-create with spirit. And I've had this fox photograph for a long time that I knew I wanted to work with, and it just came out. So I love the fact that you have been making fox references, and whether people realize it or not, they're all foxy ladies at the Oasis. So so that might, if there are any men who are watching, they might want to join us, because
That's right.
Oasis ladies are foxy. Love that share.
That's so beautiful, Kathryn. That is,
Thank you.
and fox is just such a beautiful creature that just looking at a photo of fox, I can feel, and I hope other people can too, can feel the magic of life. just in an image of fox.
Well,
There's
in that particular image, I loved the curiosity.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
even there, we could see a sacred conversation between fox and the butterfly. So
yes,
here, the butterfly is curious about the transformation because this butterfly in this magical setting, and there's a mushroom in there too, is like, "Oh, how did you transform? Tell me the story of your transformation." And fox is curious about that. In that, that's one of the stories I see
yes.
in what I created there.
And so this would be a good place to go back to a question earlier, because now I have a way to describe it. When we think about what is a totem animal,
Yeah.
and right, and so fox has been with me for years and years, and I just finally was like, oh, fox is one of my totems. And so here's a good why, and part of how I figured. So um, fox kits don't gain their eyesight for quite a while. So their eyes stay closed for quite a while. And so according to uh, many that are well versed in the field, that means that somebody with fox totem is going to have their greatest challenges in their life during their childhood. And that's me. My greatest challenge in my life so far was, losing a parent when I was a child, and all that that meant. And also another characteristic of fox is fox's main medicine is camouflage, the ability to disappear. And so a person who has, fox totem in their lineup is able to be, say, in the middle of a room full of people and just disappear into the crowd. And then everybody's like, oh, what happened to her? Where did she go? I never, but she didn't go anywhere. She just stood against the wall and blended into the wall. And that was really hard for me to understand at first when I was younger and first really getting acquainted with the metaphysical world, it that I did have the ability to shift my vibrations and energy so that I wouldn't be seen or noticed. And it doesn't mean that I wasn't still physically present, but I shifted my vibration. And that's all I'll say about that, because that's a whole other topic. But
Well,
Fox,
but I would like to say something here. I'm going to interject here to that. I think it's a great example that you just shared of how we can grow into some of these characteristics and learn for ourselves. We don't become a victim of, well, I've become invisible. We may have experienced that, but once we realize that we have the power to be invisible and use that strategically when it will serve us, that's learning how to be cunning and strategic
mhm,
and embodying that.
yes, yes, yes.
That's how we learn from the animals and how it can be very empowering for us when we step into it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Definitely. And so again with Fox, because Fox keeps showing up over and over again for me and has for a long time. And, also this speaks to certain animals that are hard to see. Fox tends to try not to be seen, but then there's certain people who just see the animal all the time, and other people in the world like, I've never seen a fox in my life. And that's another way to know when your totem animals are coming to you, is when you see them and other people around you don't see them at all. Every animal is very powerful.
What would you tell somebody who draws a card and like, I don't like this card?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so this is a real dilemma. This is a real topic, because we as a culture have so many cultural definitions and stories and lore about certain animals. And some of the biggies are snake and spider. Right? People are like, oh, I hate snakes, or oh, spiders, and they'll squash a spider whenever they see one, right? And another one that's really hard to draw is tick. And especially with what's going on in our world today with Lyme disease, people hate ticks, right? So when you draw a card, depending on what deck you're working with, that's an animal that a lot of people kind of hate right now. And that's kind of crazy to hate them, but it's how it works sometimes. So what I like to say to myself and to others is every single creature has beneficial qualities, and um, you can look at their qualities as assets. And so we'll take tick, for example, because that's one that I know someone who really had a hard time working with tick. And so one of the qualities of tick, right? Ticks hang out on tall grass, waiting for a ride to come by. And when that ride comes by, they don't miss the opportunity and they jump, right? They don't probably literally jump. They get swooshed on, but they don't hesitate to grab an opportunity when it comes by. Look at how beautiful that is.
Yeah, and they put themselves out there by hanging out in, like, that seems like out on a limb kind of thing. Like they're willing to be patient and put themselves out there for the right opportunity. Oh my gosh, I never would have thought of that about tick. As you were talking, I'm like, okay, I think they're really hard to kill, so they've got a lot of fortitude, and so like that's what was coming to mind.
Yeah. So when we look at, I think the animals that we like the least are the ones that push us to really look at patterns and characteristics and not be focused on the animal and our emotional response to the animal, but to really zero in on characteristics like that, the ability to hang out and wait until a ride comes along. But it's important, most people want to think that in this animal medicine world that we just are like eagle and hawk and bear and deer, but we have to remember that every creature is part of the divine creation. So every creature, has something to teach us and something in some way to help us.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest takeaways from this is not only do we have these animals that we can learn from, but where it becomes meaningful is when we start making a personal connection with what that animal can teach us and how it relates to our life in the moment. All right, I started the Oasis just recently. You've been a regular participant. I'd love to hear why you've been coming back and how is it helping you personally? How's it helping you professionally? What would you tell people who've never been to the Oasis what our weekly online retreat is like for you?
Okay. All right. So when you began to offer the Oasis, I was so excited because I had learned about you, right? Our paths have crossed a lot and we didn't know it, right? But I've really learned about you for the first time maybe a year ago when a friend of mine shared with me about your goddess work, and you were going to be offering something at the Rose Center in December, and I had commented on Facebook that I wanted to try to come to it, and I was so excited to meet you and work with you. And then we ended up selling our house, and my whole everything shifted and changed. And then of course once we moved into our new home, not too long after, the whole world changed, and we all started cocooning because of this pandemic. And lo and behold, the Rose Center sent me something that you were offering, an hour long or whatnot, right? And I thought,
Thursday. Yeah, it was a Thursday event.
Yes. And I thought, ooh. So I signed up for it and I participated, and I just, we did a guided meditation, and I offer a lot of guided meditations, and I hear people say to me, oh, it's so easy to follow your voice. And you are the first person who I experienced that it was that easy to follow and to participate deeply in that guided meditation. And I love learning about the energy systems in the body and the chakras. So we were focused on the heart chakra that day, and you brought your mandalas in, and I just thought, I want more of this. And it was maybe at the end of that you said, oh, I'll be offering this, the Oasis. I signed up for the first one. And one thing I must say is you've made it so accessible with the price point at $10, participation right now. And that was so doable for me. I thought, how could I not do this? That's very feasible. So I did. And the guided meditation every single time is one of the pieces that keeps bringing me back. I love guided meditation. I love soul journeying. And every time in this time of the pandemic, we use, a lot of the world is using, shut down and the world is closed. And I think we're all cocooning, right? And so this has been such a great time I haven't been able to show up every Friday because of some other family things, but basically every Friday to get to take a soul journey. That's such an important part of cocooning, is to be in touch with, what's going on at a deeper level in my being. And I love meeting, you have women from all over the world present. I remember one night, because I come at night, one night there was a woman from Australia there, and just to hear her Australian accent was just music to my ears. But there's women from the Midwest and the West Coast and the South, and then us in New Hampshire. And that has been incredible, just that little piece of it, to feel connected to the rest of the world during this time. So that is, and then you call it soul tapas. And I love that because, last week we learned about the goddess Artemis, and, you gave us a bite of Artemis. You've got probably this, as I understand it, this bigger work on goddesses, and we got a bite of it. And I loved that because it was just enough to get me excited and energized about learning more about the goddesses. I'm not well versed in astrology. I'm a basic working understanding. So every time you bring astrology in, I'm just like, whoop, okay, I'm adding to, my knowledge base and my understanding. So I learn a lot. It's creative. You always provide some kind of template, a mandala or a template, and I usually color it and do some kind of creating with it. I'm not a strong visual artist. If somebody else is creating a visual art activity, I participate with great joy. But my creative endeavors are more written expression. So I'd love the opportunity to be provided with this template and just go to town with my markers and colored pencils. So it's a Friday, and again for me, evening, because I choose the evening session. It's a Friday evening. It's a great way to wrap up the week and a great way to get in touch with my creative self, and to have a little, connect with you. So that's huge.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I mean, those are just such lovely words, and a great way of explaining a little bit about what the experience has held for you and can offer other people. Tell us more about you. I know you've got, you and your husband have got some big dreams, big projects in the work. What's next for you? And yeah, tell us all about your newest adventure.
Okay. So, yes. Where do I start? So I spent 30 years in education, working with children around their academic journey, in school, in wilderness programs. And then I also, for the past 14 years, ran my own educational coaching and consulting practice. And a year or so ago, it came to me that work was completing. and it was time to move in a new direction. And so, what I loved about that work that I want to take moving forward is helping people, supporting people in discovering their beauty, their talents, their gifts. And it is my belief that the Goddess, Creator endows each one of us with gifts and talents, and it's our responsibility to share those with the world. And so I want to help more people share their gifts and talents with the world. I am launching, I'm working on my website right now, so I don't have it. My cat has come here to visit, speaking of animals. I am launching, there we go, my new website soon that will explain all of this. I call it Awakening the Giant Within, helping people on that journey, whether they are 18 years old and finishing high school and they want to carve their path in the world with authenticity, or whether they've reached a point in their life at 45 or 50 where they realize I'm not living in authenticity. I'm not living my soul's purpose, and helping them find that purpose and then make the shifts and changes in their life to bring their life in alignment with their purpose. So that's a longer description of it. And then at the same time, my husband and I have moved to northern New Hampshire, and we will be starting a guide business, and we are calling it Two Guides. And my husband is the outer guide and I am the inner guide. And our dream is to host experiences for people where there will be a component of being out in the natural world, connecting with Mother Nature, Pachamama, with the animals. And then there will also be an inner guide experience of bringing that meaningfulness in and finding the meaning for it from within. So that's all to come.
That's so exciting. I will be definitely sharing your information as a follow-up, even though you don't have that ready now. When you do, I will be sharing that with our audiences. I'll update below the YouTube channel. So if somebody catches this recording much later after it's been published, any updates will be in that description, as well as I'll be giving a follow-up to our community as well. Susan, thank you so much for sharing with us your experience with animal allies. I do hope all of you who are watching this are excited to explore animals further and want to do a little deeper dive, a little soul tapas. Definitely a worthwhile experience joining me over at the Oasis. The next session that focuses on animal allies, because this will be a recurring theme throughout the year, will be June 12th, 2020. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you again, Susan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.